So welcome back. We have started the cardiovascular system of Hoplobatrachus diabetes, and this presentation brings to you the arterial system of the arterial system actually it includes the blood vessels which carry the blood away from the heart to different parts of the body, and all these blood vessels put together forms what is referred as the arterial system. In frog arterial system, you can see that the system begins with truncus arteriosus, which divides into two large left and right branches or the trunks of truncus arteriosus, and each of the branch divides further into three aortic arches: the anterior carotid arch or the common carotid, and then you have the aortic arch or the systemic arch, and then we have the pulmocutaneous. So it's three larger arches or trunks. It arises from the truncus arteriosus. Okay. So and from each of these, you can see carotid arch. It supplies blood to the head region. Then the systemic arch, it supplies blood to the various body parts. Pulmocutaneous, as the name suggests, it carries blood to the the lungs as well as the skin. So the carotid arch of each side, it further divides into external and internal. All these we will be discussing in the coming slides. Okay, I suppose it is clear. So we have the arterial system starting from truncus arteriosus, and each of the truncus arteriosus divides into two, left and right trunk. And then further it divides into three arches: the carotid, the systemic, and the pulmocutaneous. Okay, so you can see how it is. So the truncus arteriosus, it divides into two, the left and the right aortic trunk, and each of these aortic trunk it divides into systemic, carotid, and pulmocutaneous. You can see here from the left aortic trunk arises the left systemic, carotid, and pulmocutaneous. At the same time, from the right we have the common carotid, pulmocutaneous, and the right systemic, three branches each. Okay, then from the common carotid the common carotid divides into two, the external carotid, or it is otherwise known as the lingual artery, and then we have the internal carotid. The external carotid, it goes to the lower jaw and tongue, and the internal carotid to the orbit in the sense the eyes, okay, and the brain. So the external carotid supplies blood to the lower jaw and the tongue, while the internal carotid it supplies the orbit and the brain. Each internal carotid soon after the it emerges out from the main common carotid arch, it bears a swollen carotid body, or it is referred as the carotid labyrinth. Okay, it is formed from the second pair of gills. Now, carotid body have a network of capillaries and chromophene cells. The carotid body, it is responsible for detecting the presence of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. So it is somewhat like a chemoreceptor. Okay. Then we have the other vessels that include the palatine, as the name suggests, it is to the upper jaw. Then we have the ophthalmic, again from the name itself it is clear. We have cerebral, the head region. So common carotid on either side, it divides into two, external carotid and internal carotid. Okay. Now the pulmocutaneous, each of the pulmocutaneous arch divides further into two arteries: a pulmonary artery as it goes into the lungs, and cutaneous artery goes in, supplies blood to the skin and the buccal cavity. So this is responsible for the gaseous exchange, or it is pulmonary as well as cutaneous. Even the buccal epithelium, it is meant for respiration. They are respiratory surfaces. Okay, so these are the main two. Now we can see what happens to the systemic. The systemic arch, the two systemic arch, they pass outward and then curve around the esophagus to join to form a median dorsal aorta. Okay, so it forms a dorsal aorta. It goes backward or posteriorward just beneath the vertebral column, and each systemic arch on the way to form the dorsal aorta, it weaves of three arteries: esophageal, occipitovertebral, and subclavian. And dorsal aorta, once it forms dorsal aorta, it moves back. It actually moves backward or runs backward, posteriorward, and it goes till the tip of the tail. Okay, so here dorsal aorta on its way, it gives off many branches, that is posterior mesenteric, uh, celiaco-mesenteric. Then we have the common iliac, venous, and gonadial. The celiaco-mesenteric and the posterior mesenteric, it supplies various parts of the alimentary canal. Common iliac, it is again supplying the hind limbs. Renals, as the name suggests, it supplies the kidneys. Gonadial, it supplies the gonads, the spermatic and the or the ovarian. Okay. Now, at the same time, as we have seen, the systemic, before it joins with the left systemic, the two systemic, the right and the left, before it joins to form the dorsal aorta, on its way, it gives off branches, that is the esophageal, occipitovertebral, and subclavian. Okay, so now we can see how the figure goes. Okay, this you have to study, it is important for the exam. Okay. So here you can see the trunk, the first component in the arterial system is the truncus arteriosus. The truncus arteriosus emerges from the anterior end of the on the ventral side of the ventricle. Okay, and it emerges out. It gives off two trunks. Right. The this one you can see you have the carotid trunk. You have the systemic. This is the systemic, and you have the pulmocutaneous. Okay, on either side you do have. And this carotid trunk, the common carotid trunk, it gives off two branches. The lingual, it is the external carotid, and you have the internal carotid. The carotid, this one, okay. So this is the internal carotid and this is the external carotid. The internal carotid at its base, that is soon after its commencement, soon after branches out, you can see there is a swollen structure, and this is known as the carotid labyrinth, or what we have referred as a carotid body, and it contains the chemoreceptors meant for detecting the presence of oxygen and carbon dioxide. It also contains baroreceptors, or the what you call pressure receptors. Okay, receptors that detect the pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide. That is what it is. Now the baroreceptors, chemoreceptors. Okay. Now, pulmocutaneous, you can see the pulmocutaneous. The pulmocutaneous, it gives off a very long branch. Here you can see this is the cutaneous, and then you have the pulmonary trunk. Okay. So you have these two, pulmonary as well as cutaneous, arising from the pulmocutaneous main arch. Okay. Now systemic. Okay. Systemic, what it does is the right and the left systemic, it curves down, and it curves around the esophagus. It moves posteriorward and it joins together to form the dorsal aorta. So this is the dorsal aorta. Okay, and this one, these two are the right and the left systemic trunk. Okay, on the way to form the dorsal aorta, each of the systemic trunk, it gives off branches. We can see subclavian, here occipitovertebral, and the esophageal. Okay, so the esophageal artery, as the name suggests, it gives off branches. It is a branch which supplies the esophagus. Occipitovertebral artery, it supplies head, vertebral column, and spinal cord. Subclavian, which we can see, it is one of the largest arising from the systemic trunk. It supplies the forelimb. The esophageal artery very often arises from the occipitovertebral artery. So we have three branches: occipitovertebral, the subclavian, and the esophagus, starting from each of the systemic trunk. Okay, so now we can see the dorsal aorta. From the dorsal aorta, the first vessel to arise, it is this one. Okay, what is this actually? This is the celiaco-mesenteric arch. Okay, sorry, the celiaco-mesenteric artery. Now this celiaco-mesenteric artery, it gives off many branches, and you can see it supplies blood to the alimentary canal and the organs associated with the alimentary canal, isn't it? The celiaco-mesenteric artery, it is a large but unpaired artery that arises. You can see at the junction where the dorsal aorta is formed, isn't it? The point where the dorsal aorta is formed by the union of right and the left systemic artery. It is from that particular point of union the celiaco-mesenteric arises. It is a single artery; they are not paired. So far, whatever vessels we have mentioned, all these were paired, but here celiaco-mesenteric is unpaired. Okay. Now, the celiaco-mesenteric artery, passing through the mesentery, it divides into two main branches, a small celiac, you can see. Okay. So it passes off this one along the alimentary canal. Okay, so it gives off a celiac artery. You can see over here, and anterior mesenteric artery. So this is it divides into celiac as well as the anterior mesenteric. So this is a celiac artery, and this is a mesenteric artery. This is a celiaco-mesenteric. Okay, now the celiac artery. It supplies blood to the stomach through the gastric artery and liver through the hepatic artery. Okay, so you can see this is the celiac. It gives off hepatic and gastric. Okay, now coming to the large anterior mesenteric branch, it sends up branches to the duodenum. You can see the duodenal and spleen, the splenic. Here you can see the splenic artery. Then ileum, the intestinal region. The intestinal region, intestinal artery actually supplies the iliac region. So all these are the various arteries from the celiaco-mesenteric. Okay. Now we can see the gonadial one going downward, posteriorward. You can see the next is a pair of gonadial artery. The gonadial artery, a pair, it gives off branches to the gonads. In male, it is spermatic artery, and in female, it is an ovarian artery. Okay, in general, we can mention it as a gonadial form, a pair of gonadial artery. Further posteriorward we go, we can see the next set of arteries arising from the dorsal aorta. They are the renals. The dorsal aorta, it gives off almost like 5 to 6 pairs of renal arteries supplying the kidneys. You can see over here. Okay, so these renals, it supplies the kidneys. Further downward dorsal aorta, it gives off two main branches, a pair of common iliac. Okay, so these dorsal aorta, it divides into two large iliac arteries supplying the hind limbs, and each of the iliac enters the leg, the hind limb, and gives off a branch which divides into epigastric, supplying the central body wall, and a rectovisceral artery which supply the rectum and the bladder. A femoral artery to the skin and the muscles of the anterior part of the thigh, that is femur region, and the iliac artery that continues further as the sciatic. Okay, so here you can see the iliac artery, it gives off two branches, that is epigastric and the rectovisceral, and further downward it divides into two, the femoral and the sciatic. Okay, this sciatic, it is actually continuation of the iliac artery on either side. I hope it is clear. So truncus arteriosus emerges out from the anterior end of the ventricle. Then it divides into two. Each of the common trunk, it divides further into three. The carotid artery, which supplies the head region. The common carotid, it divides into two, the external and the internal. The external is otherwise known as the lingual. The internal is supplies the orbit region, the eye region, etc. While the lingual, as the name suggests, it supplies the lower jaw. The internal carotid, it is having a what you call a carotid labyrinth or the carotid body, which contains chemoreceptors for detecting the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. Now the next one we have is a pulmocutaneous. The pulmocutaneous, it gives of two branches, that is a you can see the cutaneous branch, very large one, and a pulmonary branch to the respective lungs on the main lung on the respective side. Okay, then we have the systemic trunk, which curves down along the esophageal region. It moves for posteriorward and it joins with the systemic trunk from the other side to form what is known as the dorsal aorta. And on its way downward, each of the systemic trunk gives of three branches. You can see the subclavian, the occipitovertebral, and the esophageal. Okay, from the dorsal aorta, the first of the artery which arises, it is an unpaired one. It is the celiaco-mesenteric. Okay, celiaco-mesenteric supplies blood vessels to gives up branches to the various parts of the alimentary canal. Downward, you can see it. The dorsal aorta gives up branches to the gonads. Then we have 5 to 6 pairs towards the kidney. And further downward, the dorsal aorta divides into two iliac, common iliac, and each of the iliac supplies the hind limbs on its side. So this is all about the arterial system. Okay, I hope it is clear. You have to learn to draw the diagram and label it properly. Okay, fine. Thank you.